you don't feel free. And it's not because of your circumstances. It's because you're being watched. Not by cameras, not by people in the room, by something far more invasive, an invisible jury living in your mind. And right now, it's deciding if you're allowed to exist the way you want to. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Every time you hesitate before speaking, every time you second-guess a decision, every time you soften your truth to make it more acceptable, you're not thinking, you're performing. Performing for people who aren't even there. And if that hits a nerve, good, because this is where it starts. Within the next few minutes, you're going to see something most people never notice, that your emotions, your reactions, your anxiety, your guilt aren't fully yours. They've been shaped, filtered, and approved by a collective standard you didn't consciously choose. A morality script, a social contract, a silent agreement that says, be acceptable or be rejected. So, you learned to adjust, to edit, to fracture yourself into versions that fit. But here's the cost no one talks about. Every time you trade your internal authority for social approval, you weaken your ability to trust yourself. And eventually, you don't even know who's making your decisions anymore. Pause for a second. Think about your last big decision. Did it feel clear at first, and then slowly become confusing the more opinions you collected? That wasn't confusion. That was interference. This video isn't about motivation. It's about extraction. Removing the invisible forces that have been quietly running your life. Because the moment you see the jury, you stop performing for it. You weren't born doubting yourself. You learned it, slowly, subtly, systematically. As a child, your instincts were immediate. You liked something, you reached for it. You didn't, you rejected it. No hesitation. No committee meeting in your head. But then, the training began. Don't do that. That's not appropriate. Listen to people who know better. And just like that, a hierarchy was installed. Authority lives outside of you. Beat. Teachers, parents, experts, society, all positioned above your own internal signals. Now, understand this carefully. Guidance isn't the problem, but dependency is. Because over time, something dangerous happened. You stopped checking in with yourself first. Instead of asking, what do I feel? You started asking, what would they think? That shift right there is the fracture point. Think about how you make decisions now. You don't just consider outcomes, you simulate reactions. How will this look? Will they approve? Will this make me seem irresponsible, selfish, unrealistic? And just like that, your life becomes a negotiation, not between options, but between authenticity and acceptance. Here's what makes this even more dangerous. You don't experience this as control. You experience it as being reasonable, as being mature, as being realistic. But underneath that is fear. Fear of stepping outside the collective script, fear of being judged, fear of standing alone in your own decisions. And here's the twist. The more you rely on external validation, the less capable you become of generating internal certainty. So you compensate. You gather more opinions, more perspectives, more clarity. But clarity never comes because you're not lacking information, you're disconnected from your authority. And until that reconnects, every decision will feel like a negotiation with a crowd that never stops talking.
Let's dismantle something most people never question: collective morality. It feels solid, universal, almost sacred. But it's not. It's a shifting agreement, a social average of what's currently acceptable. And that means one thing: it's unstable. What was once wrong becomes normal. What was once praised becomes criticized. And through it all, people adjust. Not because truth changed, but because acceptance did. So ask yourself this: if the rules keep changing, why are you outsourcing your identity to them? Here's where it gets uncomfortable. You think you're making decisions based on what's right, but most of the time, you're making decisions based on what's acceptable. And those are not the same thing. Acceptable keeps you included. Right aligns you internally. And when those two conflict, most people betray themselves to stay included. That's the mechanism behind emotional suppression, behind burnout, behind that quiet resentment you can't fully explain. Because every time you override your internal signal to match external expectations, you create tension. Not loud tension, silent tension. The kind that builds over time, the kind that turns into exhaustion without a clear cause. And here's the part no one admits: the invisible jury you fear isn't even unified. Different people expect different things. Different groups have conflicting standards. So no matter what you do, you will disappoint someone. Which means this entire system you've been optimizing for, it's unwinnable. And yet, you keep playing. Why? Because somewhere along the way, you were convinced that belonging requires self-abandonment. But what if that's the lie? What if emotional sovereignty, true internal authority, means this: you stop negotiating your truth with a system that can't even agree with itself, and instead, you start listening to the one signal that's been consistent your entire life: your own.
It doesn't happen dramatically. You don't wake up one day and decide to lose your authority. It happens in micro moments. A question, a hesitation, a quick text. What do you think I should do? That sentence seems harmless, collaborative even, but underneath it is a quiet transfer of power. You're not just asking for input, you're asking for permission. Watch this closely. You have a clear instinct about something, a direction, a pull. Then doubt creeps in. Not because your instinct disappeared, but because you don't trust it to stand alone. So you outsource. One opinion becomes two. Two become five. Now you're flooded with perspectives. And suddenly, that original clarity feels distant. Not because it was wrong, but because it got drowned out. This is how self-trust erodes. Not through failure, but through constant override. And here's the deeper layer. You've trained yourself to believe that confidence comes after consensus, that you're only allowed to feel certain once others agree. But that's backward. Real certainty is internal. Consensus is external noise layered on top of it. So here's a simple but brutal question. When was the last time you made a decision and didn't seek reassurance afterward? Not validation, not confirmation, just ownership. For most people, that feels uncomfortable, exposed, even reckless. Why? Because you're stepping outside the system that's been regulating your behavior. And that system has one job: keep you predictable, keep you acceptable, keep you safe. But safety has a cost. It costs you your authority.
So, how do you take it back? Not through rebellion, not through ignoring everyone,
but through something far more precise: recalibration. You're not removing the world's voice, you're repositioning it. Step 1. Catch the reflex. Notice the moment you're about to outsource your decision, that urge to ask, to check, to confirm. Pause and ask yourself a better question. Am I seeking perspective or permission? That distinction changes everything. Step 2. Consult internally first. Before any external input, sit with the decision, not mentally, physically. Drop your awareness into your body, because your body doesn't perform, it responds. Tension, expansion, resistance, ease. These aren't abstract ideas, they're signals. Signals you've been trained to ignore. Step 3. Test options somatically. Think about each choice and notice what happens internally. One option might feel tight, contracted. Another might feel open, even if it's scary. That's your system communicating, not logically, but accurately. Step 4. Decide and don't dilute it. Once you choose, don't run it through the approval machine. No post-decision polling. No, just checking if this makes sense. Let the discomfort exist, because that discomfort isn't a sign you're wrong. It's a sign you're no longer outsourcing authority, and that's unfamiliar. This is how self-trust is built, not through perfect decisions, but through owned decisions. Because every time you act from internal alignment, you strengthen the signal, and over time, that signal becomes undeniable.
Here's why most people never reach emotional sovereignty. It's not because they can't, it's because they won't accept the cost. Because reclaiming your authority comes with something most people spend their lives avoiding: disapproval. The moment you stop performing for the invisible jury, you become unpredictable, harder to categorize, harder to control, harder to agree with, and that will unsettle people. Not because you're wrong, but because you're no longer following the script they understand. You will be misunderstood. You will be judged. You will be questioned. And if your identity is still tied to being approved of, that will feel unbearable. So most people retreat. They go back to performing, back to negotiating their truth for acceptance. But here's the trade-off. You can be accepted, or you can be sovereign. Rarely both. And this is the final shift. You stop asking, will they approve of this version of me? And start asking, can I respect myself if I don't do this? That question realigns everything. Because emotional sovereignty isn't about being right, it's about being aligned. Not with society, not with expectations, but with the one authority that's been with you from the beginning. So the next time you feel that pull to ask, what do you think I should do? Stop and realize that moment is the doorway. Walk through it, and you stop living on approval. Stay where you are, and you'll keep performing for a jury that was never qualified to judge you in the first place.
If this conversation gave you something to think about, a new perspective, or even a small sense of clarity, then this channel is for you. Consider joining this growing community by subscribing, and leave a like on the video so more people searching for answers can find these ideas too. Your support keeps these conversations alive. Until the next video, keep reflecting, keep growing, and keep pondering life's journeys.